Why God uses broken people. 7 biblical reasons. Somewhere along the way, many people quietly come to the same conclusion. God uses strong people, faithful people, put together people, but not me. They believe their wounds are evidence of disqualification. Their past mistakes feel like permanent marks. Their ongoing struggles become reasons to stay silent, stay hidden, stay on the sidelines. Brokenness has a way of convincing people that usefulness belongs to someone else. But when you actually slow down and look at Scripture, not selectively, not ideally, but honestly, you begin to notice something unsettling and hopeful at the same time. God's story is not built on unbroken people. It never has been. Again and again, God steps directly into lives marked by failure, weakness, fear, doubt, and regret, and He chooses to work there, not after everything is fixed, not once the pain is gone, right in the middle of it. That can be difficult to accept because brokenness feels like something to overcome before we are useful. We spend so much energy trying to hide it, manage it, or rush past it. We assume that healing must come first, and then calling will follow. But Scripture tells a different story, one where brokenness is not the obstacle, it's often the doorway. This is not a message that celebrates pain or excuses sin. God does not cause brokenness for entertainment or teaching moments, but He also does not waste it. And He does not wait for people to become flawless before inviting them into purpose. If you're listening right now with a sense that your life feels fragmented, faith mixed with doubt, obedience mixed with struggle, love mixed with regret, this matters because the Bible does not present broken people as exceptions. It presents them as the pattern. God's power has always moved most over time, through lives that knew they could not rely on themselves. And that truth has the power to change how you see your story, not as something that disqualifies you, but as something God may already be using to shape you. So don't rush past this. Let the idea settle, because the reasons God uses broken people are not accidental, and understanding them may change how you see yourself forever. Number 1. Because brokenness removes the illusion of self-sufficiency. One of the first things brokenness does, often without our permission, is strip away the illusion that we are enough on our own. Before life cracks us open, it's easy to believe we can manage, control, or outgrow our limits through effort and determination. Strength feels like independence, confidence feels like capability, and slowly, without meaning to, self-reliance takes the place where trust in God was meant to live. Brokenness interrupts that story. When something shatters, whether through failure, loss, sin, disappointment, or weakness, we come face to face with our limits. The plans we trusted fail. The strength we relied on runs out. The version of ourselves we believed in no longer holds. And while that feels terrifying, Scripture consistently shows that this is often where God begins His deepest work. God has never built His purposes on human self-sufficiency. He builds them on dependence. From the beginning, God chooses people who know they need Him, not because they are incapable, but because they are honest. Brokenness creates that honesty. It forces us to stop pretending we are strong enough to carry life alone, and in that surrender, space opens for God's power to move. This may be one reason brokenness is not wasted. It dismantles pride gently, or sometimes painfully, and replaces it with humility. And humility is not weakness, it is clarity. It is seeing ourselves accurately, limited, dependent, and deeply in need of grace. Many people resist brokenness because it feels like losing ground. But spiritually, it often means gaining the only foundation that lasts. When self-sufficiency falls away, trust becomes possible again. Prayer becomes real, not performative. Faith becomes necessary, not theoretical. God uses broken people because broken people stop relying on themselves. And the moment that happens, God's strength has room to work. Number 2, because brokenness creates a dependence that strength cannot. Strength has a subtle danger. It can make us believe we don't need help. It can keep us moving just fast enough to avoid reflection, and it can convince us that dependence on God is optional rather than essential. Brokenness removes that illusion. When you are broken, dependence is no longer a spiritual idea. It becomes survival. Scripture shows this pattern repeatedly. People cry out to God not when they feel capable, but when they are desperate. Not when everything is under control, but when control has slipped away. Brokenness teaches us what strength never could, how to lean, and God responds to that posture. Dependence does not mean passivity. It means alignment. It means recognizing where power truly comes from. Broken people tend to, you may notice, more closely, pray more honestly, and cling more tightly to God. Not because they are more spiritual, but because they are more aware of their need. This may be one reason God often does his most meaningful work in seasons when people feel weakest. Not because weakness is the goal, but because dependence is. Strength often resists instruction. Brokenness invites it. When you know you cannot save yourself, fix yourself, or carry yourself, your heart becomes open. Teachability grows. Pride loosens its grip, and God, who resists the proud but draws near to the humble, meets people in that space. Brokenness creates a dependence that does not fade. When life improves, it leaves a mark, a memory, a humility that says, I know what happens when I rely on myself, and I know what happens when I rely on God. That kind of dependence is powerful. It anchors faith, it steadies obedience, and it keeps people connected to grace long after the pain has passed. God uses broken people because broken people stay close. They don't assume, they don't rush ahead, they walk carefully, prayerfully, aware that every step forward is sustained by God, not themselves, and that awareness changes everything. Number 3, because broken people understand grace from the inside. There is a difference between knowing about grace and needing it. Brokenness is what moves grace from a concept into an experience. People who have never been confronted with their own limits can talk about mercy, but broken people recognize it. They don't debate it, they depend on it. Scripture consistently shows that those who have been forgiven much love deeply, not because they are better, but because they can help to remember what it cost them to be restored. Brokenness sharpens that memory. It keeps grace close. This may be one reason God often entrusts his work to people who have been through failure, loss, or deep struggle. They don't treat grace lightly. They don't assume it. They don't weaponize it against others. They understand how fragile the human heart can be and how powerful God's mercy is. Broken people tend to be gentler with others. You may notice differently. They make room for weakness because they know it personally. They don't rush to judge what they once needed patience for themselves. That kind of compassion cannot be taught in theory. It is formed in experience. Grace that has been lived becomes grace that can be shared. God uses broken people because they know the ground they stand on is mercy. They don't speak from superiority. They speak from gratitude, and that makes their witness believable, authentic, healing. When someone who has been broken talks about hope, it carries weight. When someone who has been restored talks about grace, it sounds real. People can sense the difference between borrowed words and lived truth. Brokenness does not make people perfect messengers. It makes them honest ones, and honesty is where healing often begins. Number 4, because brokenness makes God's power impossible to miss. Another reason God uses broken people is because brokenness removes confusion about where the power comes from. When someone over time lacks the resources to succeed on their own, any fruit that follows points away from them and directly toward God. Strength invites applause. Brokenness invites awe. Scripture repeatedly highlights this pattern. God chooses people whose limitations are obvious, not to embarrass them, but to make his presence unmistakable. When success cannot be explained by talent, confidence, or control, it becomes a testimony to grace at work. Brokenness removes the temptation to take credit. This is difficult for human pride, but beautiful for faith. When someone knows they are not enough, they stop trying to be impressive. They stop pretending. They show up honestly, and God moves through that honesty in ways that surprise everyone involved. God's power shines brightest where human strength runs out. This does not mean God despises ability or competence. It means he refuses to compete with pride. Brokenness clears the stage so that when change happens, healing comes, or lives are transformed. The source is clear. People are not drawn to broken servants because they are flawless. They are drawn because they are real, and because God's presence is evident in their weakness. God uses broken people because their lives tell the truth. This is not human effort dressed up as faith. This is grace doing what strength never could. Number 5. Because broken stories become testimonies that heal others. God does not waste pain, not the pain you understand, and not the pain you still struggle to explain. One of the deepest reasons God uses broken people is because broken stories speak to broken hearts in a way polished stories never can. People don't heal through perfection. They heal through connection. When someone shares a story marked by struggle, regret, or weakness, and redemption within it, others feel permission to be honest. Broken people create space. They lower defenses. They invite truth. Their lives quietly say, "You're not alone, and this isn't the end." This may be one reason testimony carries such power in Scripture. Not because it highlights human achievement, but because it reveals what God can do in places that once looked ruined. A broken story turned toward God becomes a bridge between despair and hope, shame and grace, isolation and belonging. God often chooses people who have known darkness because they recognize it in others. They don't rush healing. They don't offer shallow answers. They sit with pain because they've sat in it themselves. And that kind of presence heals more than advice ever could. Broken stories also remind people that transformation is possible. Not instant, not painless, but real. When someone sees that God did not abandon you in your brokenness, it challenges the lie that brokenness is final. God uses broken people because their lives tell the truth about grace. It meets people where they are and carries them forward, step by step. What feels like your greatest liability may become the very place God touches others most deeply, not because the pain was good, but because redemption is conclusion. Brokenness was never a barrier to God's work. It has always been part of the way he works. From the beginning of Scripture to the present moment, God consistently chooses people who know they are not enough and proves that he is. This does not mean God desires pain or celebrates failure. It means he refuses to abandon people because of it. He does not wait for perfection. He does not require completion before calling. He meets people in the middle of their weakness and begins shaping purpose there. If you believe that healing must come before usefulness, Scripture gently corrects that idea. God often heals through usefulness, through obedience and weakness, through faith that shows up imperfectly but honestly. Brokenness does not disqualify you. It humbles you. It softens you. It opens you. And in that openness, God does some of his most beautiful work. You are not behind. You are not ruined. You are not overlooked. What feels like the end of something may actually be the beginning of something truer, something deeper than strength alone could ever produce. God uses broken people, not because brokenness is the goal, but because grace shines brightest there. And if God has not given up on your story, then neither should you.